Long before electric refrigerators became part of everyday life, earlier generations had to rely on their own creativity and understanding of nature to preserve food for long periods. Their methods were not only born out of necessity but also from wisdom passed down through centuries. What they achieved with basic tools and natural elements still amazes modern food scientists. These preservation techniques were so efficient that properly stored food sometimes remained safe to eat for decades. The knowledge ensured survival through winters, wars, and poor harvests, forming the backbone of food security for countless families. People once relied on a technique known as the boiling water seal to store foods with natural acidity such as tomatoes, fruits, and pickled vegetables. Freshly cooked produce would be placed into sterilized jars and then submerged in hot water for a specific time depending on altitude and jar size. As the jars cooled, a vacuum formed, sealing the contents tightly. The process destroyed harmful microorganisms while the natural acid levels in the food prevented the growth of dangerous bacteria. With only jars, lids, and a large pot, entire families could preserve their harvest. The jars, kept in cool and dark cellars, sometimes remained edible for 10 years or even more, proving how reliable this simple method was when properly done. For low-acid foods such as meat and certain vegetables, people turned to high-pressure steam preservation. This required heavy metal containers capable of reaching temperatures well above boiling. Though the equipment looked intimidating, it worked through basic physics, trapped steam, raised internal pressure and heat, killing even the most stubborn bacteria. Jars were sealed and could last for decades. Careful inspection of each jar and lid was necessary, as one small imperfection could spoil an entire batch. Still, many families opened decades-old jars of preserved stew that retained both flavor and aroma as if they had been made only weeks earlier. In areas blessed with hot, dry summers, the sun itself became a natural dehydrator. People sliced fruits and vegetables into thin pieces and placed them on clean surfaces where gentle heat could draw out moisture over several days. If the weather cooperated, the results were exceptional. Once completely dry, foods like figs, apricots, and tomatoes remained safe for years. Without moisture, bacteria and mold could not thrive. This technique dated back to ancient civilizations and remained reliable well into modern times. When stored in sealed containers, dried foods retained their nutrients and flavors for generations. Smoking meat over wood fires was another crucial preservation technique. Smokehouses, often built beside barns, filled the air with the scent of hickory, oak, or applewood. Cold smoking involved keeping temperatures low enough to dry and flavor the meat over many days, while hot smoking cooked it during the process. The combination of smoke, salt, and controlled temperature not only killed bacteria but also created an outer layer that protected the meat from air exposure. Properly smoked hams and sausages could hang for years without spoiling. Some were even found edible decades later, proof of the preservative strength of smoke and salt. Underground cellars, carved beneath homes or built into hillsides, were masterpieces of natural engineering. These storage spaces maintained steady temperatures and humidity all year round. Families stored root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and turnips in wooden boxes filled with sand or sawdust to prevent dehydration. Apples were wrapped individually in paper to avoid rot. The soil's insulation allowed food to remain in a dormant state rather than decaying. Well-designed cellars kept produce crisp and fresh for several years, providing nourishment through harsh winters when nothing could grow. Salt was considered more valuable than gold in many regions because of its remarkable ability to preserve meat and fish. By covering meat in coarse salt, moisture was drawn out through osmosis, leaving an environment too harsh for bacteria. Whole hams, sides of bacon, and barrels of fish could last for decades this way. Before eating, the food was soaked in water to remove excess salt, restoring flavor and tenderness. Mixtures of salt, sugar, and spices eventually evolved into recipes that inspired modern delicacies like pastrami and corned beef. Proper salting guaranteed safe, long-lasting food storage. Fermentation provided another fascinating way to extend food life while enhancing nutrition. When vegetables like cabbage or cucumbers were submerged in brine, beneficial bacteria converted natural sugars into lactic acid. This acid acted as a barrier against harmful microbes, turning fresh produce into sauerkraut or pickles that could survive for years. These fermented foods not only lasted but also improved with time, developing richer flavors and contributing essential vitamins during seasons when fresh vegetables were scarce. One of the most ingenious methods involved storing cooked meat beneath a layer of rendered fat. Once the meat cooled under the solidified fat, oxygen was completely blocked out, preventing bacterial growth. This practice was common with pork, duck, or beef and could keep food safe for 20 years or longer. The fat acted as both a seal and a preservative. Later, when the meat was used, the fat itself could be reused for cooking, making this a zero-waste process. Archaeological findings have even uncovered centuries-old examples of meat preserved in fat that remained edible. Honey and thick sugar syrups were also trusted as natural preservatives. Their high sugar concentration created an environment where microorganisms could not survive. Fruits sealed in honey or syrup retained their color and shape for decades. Honey never truly spoils, and jars containing ancient honey have been discovered still edible after thousands of years. Families often stored fruits this way for celebrations, keeping jars for years before opening them during weddings or anniversaries. Cheese preservation reached extraordinary levels of craftsmanship. Hard cheeses were covered in layers of wax or fat-soaked cloth, preventing moisture loss and contamination. When stored in cool cellars with stable humidity, these cheeses could mature for decades, developing sharp and complex flavors. In some families, aged wheels of cheese were passed down like heirlooms, valued as much for their taste as for their historical significance. Consistent environmental control was crucial, as even small temperature changes could affect aging. Properly aged and waxed cheese could remain not only safe but exquisite after 30 years. Vinegar was another cornerstone of preservation. Its natural acidity prevented spoilage by creating a hostile environment for bacteria. Vegetables, eggs, and even fish were pickled in vinegar solutions enhanced with salt, herbs, and spices. Stored in sealed containers, pickled goods maintained their flavor and texture for decades. Many households developed signature recipes that became part of their family identity. The tangy, sweet-sour taste of long-aged pickles often improved with time, making them prized pantry staples. Before electric dehydrators, people built wooden drying boxes or mesh racks to preserve food through air circulation and gentle heat. Thinly sliced fruits, vegetables, and meats lost most of their moisture but retained their flavor. These dried foods, sealed in jars or cloth bags with natural insect repellents like bay leaves, could last indefinitely if kept dry. Grains and beans were also dried to low moisture levels, forming the basis of stable food reserves that could last generations when stored in cool, pest-free environments. Clarified butter, or ghee, offered another durable food fat that resisted spoilage. By gently heating butter until water evaporated and milk solids separated, families produced a pure golden fat that could last for decades without refrigeration. Stored in sealed jars or crocks, clarified butter remained fresh and became more aromatic with time. In some cultures, aged ghee was considered more valuable and flavorful than freshly made butter. Wood ash provided an unconventional but surprisingly effective preservation medium. Eggs and root vegetables stored in sifted, dry wood ash were protected from moisture and bacteria. The fine ash particles sealed the pores of eggshells, keeping the contents fresh for nearly 2 years. Vegetables buried in ash avoided sprouting and rotting, extending their shelf life naturally. Once discarded, the ash could be reused as fertilizer, showing the practicality and sustainability of this method. Vacuum sealing in jars was practiced long before the invention of electric sealers. By filling jars with hot food or burning a small candle inside to consume the oxygen, people created partial vacuums. This reduced oxidation and kept dry goods like rice, flour, and beans safe for many years. Some even added bay leaves or peppercorns as natural pest deterrents. With no oxygen, insects and bacteria had no chance to survive, making these jars valuable tools for preserving pantry staples. Whole grain storage was another lesson in longevity. Instead of grinding all their wheat or corn into flour, families kept the grains whole. Stored in sealed barrels or metal containers with natural repellents like diatomaceous earth, these grains could last for half a century or more. Flour spoiled quickly due to its fat content, but unprocessed grains stayed viable even after decades, and some have been sprouted successfully after 80 years, demonstrating their resilience. Alcohol preservation turned a necessity into luxury. Strong spirits such as rum, brandy, or whiskey were poured over fruit in sealed jars. The alcohol prevented spoilage while slowly absorbing the fruit's color and aroma, creating rich, flavored liqueurs. These preserved fruits became traditional treats served during holidays or important family events. The mixture of alcohol and fruit juice kept the contents edible for decades, improving in taste as time passed. One of the most nutrient-dense foods of the past was pemmican, a mixture of dried meat powder, melted fat, and dried berries. Developed by indigenous peoples and adopted by settlers, it provided compact, long-lasting nutrition. Properly prepared, pemmican could last for 20 years and still be safe to eat. It was lightweight, energy-rich, and resistant to spoilage, making it a perfect survival food for travelers and soldiers alike. In colder climates, freezing came naturally. Ice houses insulated with sawdust allowed blocks of winter ice to last throughout the summer. Foods frozen in these conditions remained solid year-round, unaffected by temperature swings. This natural freezing method prevented freezer burn and maintained food texture better than some modern systems. Many rural communities shared communal ice houses where each family stored their supply, often preserving meat and produce for decades. The greatest strength of old preservation methods was their combination. People often used several techniques together: salting and smoking meat, then sealing it in fat, fermenting vegetables, drying them, and storing them airtight, or curing cheese before waxing it. Each step reinforced the next, creating multiple barriers against spoilage. The layered process guaranteed longevity, safety, and distinctive flavors. These ancient techniques were more than survival tactics. They represented a deep harmony between human ingenuity and the natural world. The wisdom of these preservation practices reminds us that progress doesn't always mean improvement. Long before electricity or chemical preservatives, people mastered ways to make food last for generations while retaining its flavor and nutrition. These time-tested skills prove that sometimes the simplest methods, grounded in patience and respect for nature, are still the most effective.